Hey everyone, welcome back. So today's video we're going to be talking about the human digestive system. We'll talk about some important components of the human digestive system in the upcoming videos, starting from the buccal cavity. When we talk about the buccal cavity, we also consider the nostrils and the nasal cavity because those are connected. Then you can see the mouth. The space from the nostrils is known as the nasal cavity, and the space from the mouth is known as the buccal cavity. These two cavities are separated by the palate, which is the roof of your mouth. Then you can see we have two tubes going downwards. One is the trachea, which is known as the windpipe, and right from the buccal cavity there is a tube colored pink here, which is known as the esophagus, which is the food pipe. These two pipes both originate from the pharynx, but there is a flap known as the epiglottis, as you can see. This epiglottis makes sure that food doesn't go into the windpipe. Then now you can see that you have got teeth and you got salivary glands, which are part of the buccal cavity. So when we talk about the purpose and the importance of the salivary glands, we got three different pairs. We got the parotid, we got the submandibular, and we got the sublingual. These are the three pairs of salivary glands which are present more or less underneath the tongue or at the back of the mouth. They produce saliva, which is mainly a mixture of water and amylase enzyme. Coming back to the epiglottis, like we just talked, it makes sure that it's to prevent food passage in windpipe. Otherwise, the person could choke if food goes into the windpipe. When we talk about the teeth, the purpose is to grind, crush, and cut food, and as a result a mechanical digestion happens where the food is crushed into small pieces so that the surface area of the food is increased and it is properly mixed with the saliva. And we know that saliva is important because we got enzymes in the saliva. After this, the food passes into the food pipe, which is known as the esophagus. Let's revise the function of the salivary glands and the saliva. Theoretically, we know that saliva is a mixture. It's not a compound, it's a mixture. It consists of water. Why do we have water here? To dissolve food and soften it. The more softer it becomes, the easier it is for the food to pass through the esophagus. Why do we need to dissolve the food? To provide aqueous medium so enzymes can break down the food molecules. Because enzymes can only work in aqueous medium, especially the amylase enzyme. The amylase enzyme is also present in the saliva. The function of the amylase, like we know, it is very similar to the word amylose. And you know amylose was a part of starch. So amylase is to break down starch into maltose, which is a disaccharide. You should know that's hydrolysis. Another thing we have is the HCO3 minus ions, which are the bicarbonate ions. This allows a pH of around 8 to 8.25 or 8.5, which provides the best medium, the most optimum medium for bicarbonate and amylase activity. So it provides a pH of 8.5ish to give optimum pH, optimum conditions for amylase enzyme activity. Moving on to teeth, we got 32 of those in adults. These are known as the permanent teeth. If we divide a person into two equal halves like bilateral symmetry, the two first teeth in the front are known as the incisors. I'm talking about the top only. Then there's one canine. Then we got two premolars, and then we got 3 which are molars. The similar thing can be seen on the other side of the body, and equal image can be seen towards the lower jaw. As a result, we get overall 32 teeth. Their function is to grind, cut, tear the food. At the same time, we have already talked about the mechanical digestion, which is crushing the food into small pieces for proper mixing with the saliva. Once it happens, it gets easy and more surface area for enzymatic action. Enzymatic action includes break down the food into smaller chemicals. The fourth thing is that it's easier to dissolve in the saliva because these are smaller particles after the action of the teeth after chewing, and it makes a bolus of food. This bolus of food is smaller particles of food that can easily pass through. So for example, if you take a bite of food, this first solid substance is ingested into the body, into the buccal cavity. Then you chew it and then you make a bolus out of it after salivary action and after the action of the teeth. During swallowing of the food, now we are talking about this, the epiglottis, which is a muscular flap, it rises, and it rises in a way to prevent the food from going into the trachea, or you can say the windpipe. So this is one thing that we should know. That is why it is generally suggested that we should not be talking while eating, but we can't help it. So after the mechanical digestion from the teeth and the chemical digestion caused by the salivary amylase, the food makes a soft bolus which goes to the next step. The next step is esophagus. We'll also talk about the phenomena which happens throughout the digestive tract, that is peristalsis. We know that nasal cavity begins from the nostrils and the buccal cavity begins at the mouth. We have talked about various organs which are part over there. Both these cavities combine at the pharynx. We have already talked about epiglottis, trachea, and the fact that trachea lands into the lungs. The esophagus, which is the food pipe, lands into the stomach. The esophagus is almost, more or less, a 25 centimeter long tube in adult males, which can be plus minus based on the body stature. Then we also talk about stomach. See, your esophagus is a highly muscular tube with 4 layers. The outermost layer is known as the connective tissue layer, also goes by the word serosa or adventitia. Then we got muscularis, which is the inner layer. It has got longitudinal muscles and circular muscles. So there are 2 different kinds of muscles over there. Then the third layer from the outside is the submucosa, and the innermost layer is the mucosa. When we write the functions, the connective tissue layer has the function to protect the organ and fix it in its position. Then muscularis performs peristalsis by the contraction of the muscles. Submucosa contains blood vessels to provide oxygen and nutrition, and also it got lymph vessels, which is something we'll talk about shortly. The mucosa has a layer of mucus. Why does it have mucus? Because it decreases the friction from the food that passes and obviously the esophagus. Now imagine the esophagus horizontally for a moment. Imagine this is the direction of the food from left to right. This brown thing looks like the bolus of the food. On the right side is the stomach where the food wants to go, and on the left side you got the mouth. There are 2 different kinds of muscles which are longitudinal, which run parallel to the esophagus. They are shown here as black, and there are rings of muscles which are known as the circular muscles. The region where your food is in the esophagus at the moment, it is really broad and short. This is the region where esophagus has really expanded. Why has it expanded? It wants to accommodate the food. This is the region where your longitudinal muscles have contracted and your circular muscles have relaxed. When the food has to be pushed forward, the tube becomes narrow and it becomes a little longer. This narrow region is where there is less space, so it creates a pushing force. This is where the longitudinal muscles relax and your circular muscles contract. You can see that these two muscles contract in an alternative fashion. This phenomena is peristalsis. Their alternate contraction, let me write that, their alternate muscle contraction. It is also normally known by the fact of antagonistic muscle contraction. Antagonistic because antagonist means the villain or the opposite. So antagonistic contraction means they contract in opposite ways. Overall, it creates a wave-like rhythmic motion. And this wave-like rhythmic contraction for food passage, that is exactly what we call peristalsis. There's another thing called anti-peristalsis, where this wave-like motion happens in the opposite direction and then a person feels nauseous or vomits. So these are important words to define peristalsis. I hope overall things are clear for you guys. In the next video, we'll talk about stomach. Stay tuned, guys. Thanks.